Ever wondered how a single bullet could alter the destiny of nations? What if certain leaders had lived just a few more years? Number 10. Benazir Bhutto, 2007. Pakistan held its breath on that fateful December day. Former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto stood through the sunroof of her bulletproof vehicle, waving to supporters after a campaign rally in Rawalpindi. Gunshots rang out. Then came the explosion. The first female leader of a Muslim country was gone in an instant. Bhutto had returned from exile just months earlier, promising democratic reform in a nation struggling with military rule and rising extremism. Her assassination threw Pakistan into chaos, sparking riots across the country. Elections were postponed. Her Pakistan People's Party won when the vote finally happened, riding a wave of sympathy and outrage, with her widower Asif Ali Zardari eventually becoming president. The timing couldn't have been more critical. Pakistan, a nuclear power, was experiencing growing Taliban influence in its border regions. Bhutto had promised cooperation with the United States in fighting terrorism while pushing for democratic reforms. Her death created a leadership vacuum at a crucial moment, contributing to years of instability that followed. Many Pakistanis still wonder what kind of country might have emerged had she lived. Would Pakistan-US relations have taken a different path? Would extremism have been contained more effectively? The questions linger unanswered. Number 9. Yitzhak Rabin, 1995. The peace rally in Tel Aviv was drawing to a close. Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin had just finished singing Song of Peace with the crowd of 100,000 supporters. As he walked down the steps toward his car, 3 shots were fired at close range. The assassin wasn't a Palestinian extremist, as many first assumed. It was Yigal Amir, an Israeli ultranationalist enraged by Rabin's peace negotiations with the Palestinians. Rabin had been the architect of the Oslo Accords, working alongside Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat in a historic attempt to end decades of conflict. As a decorated military general turned peacemaker, his credibility was unique. He famously declared, "You don't make peace with friends, you make it with very unsavory enemies." The assassination derailed the peace process at its most promising moment. Benjamin Netanyahu, a vocal opponent of the Oslo Accords, narrowly won the next election. The momentum toward a two-state solution faltered. Settlements expanded. Peace talks stalled. The Second Intifada erupted within 5 years. Many Israelis and Palestinians alike believe that Rabin's death fundamentally altered the trajectory of Middle East peace efforts. His former advisor, Shimon Peres, later reflected, "The bullets that killed Rabin also killed the peace process." Decades later, a comprehensive peace agreement remains elusive. Number 8. Patrice Lumumba, 1961. The Congo was barely 6 months into its independence. Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba, the charismatic independence leader who had dared to dream of a truly sovereign African nation, was being transported in the back of a vehicle through the Katanga province. Belgian officers supervised as Congolese firing squad executed him and 2 companions. Their bodies were dismembered, dissolved in acid, with some remains ground up and scattered to eliminate any evidence. Lumumba's vision for Congo had been revolutionary: genuine political and economic independence, control over its vast natural resources, and non-alignment during the Cold War. This frightened Western powers, particularly Belgium, the former colonial ruler, and the United States, which feared Soviet influence. With Lumumba eliminated, Congo fell under the control of Joseph Mobutu, later Mobutu Sese Seko, who established a pro-Western dictatorship that lasted 3 decades. He accumulated billions while the country's infrastructure and economy collapsed. The assassination also triggered a civil war that cost countless lives. The repercussions extended far beyond Congo's borders. Lumumba became a martyr for African independence movements and anti-colonial struggles worldwide. The assassination deepened suspicions of Western intentions throughout Africa, pushing some nations closer to the Soviet bloc. Only decades later did Belgium officially acknowledge its role in the assassination. Former U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower had allegedly approved a CIA plan to eliminate Lumumba. What might a truly independent Congo have achieved under his leadership? How might the map of post-colonial Africa have been redrawn? Number 7. Mahatma Gandhi, 1948. The frail 78-year-old man was walking to a prayer meeting in New Delhi, supported by his grandnieces. Nathuram Godse, a Hindu nationalist, stepped forward and fired 3 bullets at point-blank range. "Hey Ram, oh God," were reportedly Gandhi's final words as he fell. Just months earlier, Gandhi had helped secure India's independence from British colonial rule through his philosophy of non-violent resistance. He was now working tirelessly to heal the religious divides between Hindus and Muslims following the bloody partition that created Pakistan. His assassin believed Gandhi had betrayed Hindus through his tolerance toward Muslims. Gandhi's death came at a crucial moment in India's formation. Without his moral authority, communal tensions intensified in some regions. Yet his martyrdom also strengthened India's commitment to secularism and religious tolerance under its first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. His assassination transformed him from a political leader into a global icon of non-violence. The murder prompted soul-searching throughout India about religious extremism and fundamentalism. Gandhi's principles of non-violence inspired movements around the world, from the American Civil Rights Movement under Martin Luther King Jr. to Nelson Mandela's struggle against apartheid. The questions remain: could Gandhi have prevented further bloodshed between Hindus and Muslims had he lived longer? Would India-Pakistan relations have evolved differently? Might the two nations have found a more peaceful coexistence? Number 6. Martin Luther King Jr. 1968. The balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis became seared into America's collective memory on April 4, 1968. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stepped outside his room to speak with colleagues when a single rifle shot struck him in the jaw and severed his spinal cord. The most prominent voice for civil rights in America was silenced at just 39 years old. King had been in Memphis supporting a sanitation workers' strike, part of his expanding focus on economic justice and poverty. His opposition to the Vietnam War had grown more vocal. He was planning a massive Poor People's Campaign in Washington, D.C., to demand economic justice for people of all races. This broader agenda had made him increasingly controversial, even among former allies. His assassination triggered riots in more than 100 cities across America. The civil rights movement lost its most charismatic leader and most effective advocate for non-violent resistance. The movement splintered, with some groups embracing more militant approaches. King's death accelerated the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which prohibited discrimination in housing. His birthday became a national holiday. His legacy inspired civil rights movements around the world. Yet his assassination left a void in American leadership that many believe has never been truly filled. His planned economic justice campaigns were largely abandoned. The intersection of racial equality and economic justice that he began exploring remains unfinished business in American society. Would America's racial and economic landscape look different had he lived to complete his work? Number 5. John F. Kennedy, 1963. The motorcade turned onto Elm Street in downtown Dallas. Shots echoed across Dealey Plaza. The young president slumped against his wife. Within hours, a stunned nation learned that John F. Kennedy was dead at 46, killed by an assassin's bullet. Kennedy's 1,000 days in office had captivated America. He had navigated the Cuban Missile Crisis, bringing the world back from the brink of nuclear war. He had established the Peace Corps, set America on a course to the moon, and begun tentative steps towards civil rights legislation. His presidency embodied a sense of youthful optimism and possibility. The assassination transferred power to Lyndon B. Johnson, who used the national trauma to advance Kennedy's stalled agenda. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed partly because Johnson invoked Kennedy's memory. The space program accelerated, fulfilling Kennedy's promise to reach the moon by decade's end, but Vietnam loomed. Would Kennedy have escalated American involvement as Johnson did? Kennedy's advisors remained divided on this question decades later. The assassination also deepened public mistrust in government institutions, especially after the Warren Commission's conclusions about a lone gunman were questioned by many Americans. The Kennedy mystique, Camelot, as his presidency was later romanticized, was frozen in time by his death. He never faced the political challenges of a second term or the judgment of history on a completed presidency. Instead, he became a blank canvas for projections of what might have been. How might the 1960s have unfolded differently had he lived? Would American politics have taken a different path? Number 4. Abraham Lincoln, 1865. Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. was packed for a performance of Our American Cousin. In the presidential box, Abraham Lincoln and his wife Mary were enjoying a rare evening of entertainment. The Civil War had effectively ended just 5 days earlier. John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer and well-known actor, entered the box and fired a single shot into the back of Lincoln's head. The president died the following morning. Lincoln's assassination came at the precise moment when his leadership was most needed. The bloodiest conflict in American history had just concluded, and the enormous task of reconstruction, rebuilding the South and reintegrating the Confederate States was just beginning. Lincoln had outlined a plan of malice toward none, with charity for all. Without Lincoln's moderating influence, Reconstruction took a different path. His successor, Andrew Johnson, lacked Lincoln's moral authority and political skills. Johnson clashed with the radical Republicans in Congress, who eventually impeached him. The harsh policies that followed fueled resentments that would last generations. For freed slaves, Lincoln's death was a devastating blow. While debates continue about how Lincoln's racial views might have evolved, he had committed to certain basic rights for freed slaves. Without his leadership, white supremacist organizations emerged and discriminatory black codes were enacted across the South. Lincoln's assassination also had profound symbolic impact, transforming him from a controversial wartime president into a martyred national saint. His death on Good Friday invited comparisons to Christ's sacrifice, and his words took on scriptural authority in the American political tradition. What kind of reconstruction might have unfolded under Lincoln's guidance? Could the deep wounds of the Civil War have healed more completely? Might the promise of racial equality have been more fully realized? Number 3. Julius Caesar, 44 BCE. The Roman Senate chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Caesar, recently declared dictator perpetuo, dictator for life, was attending one of his last meetings before departing for a military campaign. A group of senators surrounded him, allegedly to present a petition. Instead, they pulled daggers from beneath their togas. "Et tu, Brute, you too, Brutus," Caesar reportedly gasped as he saw his friend among the assassins. Stabbed 23 times, he collapsed at the base of Pompey's statue. The conspirators, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, considered themselves defenders of the Roman Republic. They believed Caesar's growing power threatened the republican system that had governed Rome for centuries. They expected to be hailed as liberators. Instead, Caesar's assassination plunged Rome into a new round of civil wars. His adopted son Octavian, later Augustus, joined with Caesar's loyal lieutenant Mark Antony to hunt down the assassins. They defeated Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE. Eventually, Octavian outmaneuvered Mark Antony and became Rome's first emperor. The republic that the assassins had sought to preserve was gone forever. The Roman Empire rose from its ashes, bringing centuries of imperial rule. Caesar's name became synonymous with supreme leadership, giving rise to the titles Kaiser and Tsar in later European languages. Shakespeare immortalized the assassination in his play Julius Caesar, ensuring that this political murder would be remembered and reinterpreted by countless generations. The assassination remains the archetypal example of how violence intended to save a political system can instead destroy it. Had Caesar lived, would he have established a monarchy immediately? Might the Republic have evolved rather than collapsed? Could the Roman world have avoided the civil wars that followed? Number 2. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, 1914. The open-top car took a wrong turn in Sarajevo. 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip couldn't believe his luck. The previous assassination attempt on the Archduke had failed earlier that day. Now, Franz Ferdinand's vehicle had stopped just feet away from where Princip was standing. He drew his pistol and fired twice, killing the Archduke and his wife Sophie. Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. His assassin was a Bosnian Serb nationalist who wanted to end Austro-Hungarian rule over Bosnia and unite with Serbia. The assassination triggered a chain reaction of diplomatic ultimatums, military mobilizations, and alliance obligations that spiraled out of control. Within weeks, Europe's major powers were at war. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia mobilized to defend its Slavic ally. Germany honored its commitment to Austria-Hungary by declaring war on Russia and France. Britain entered when Germany invaded neutral Belgium. The assassination had lit the fuse on the powder keg of European tensions. World War I resulted in approximately 40 million casualties. 4 empires collapsed: the German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian. The map of Europe and the Middle East was redrawn. The conditions imposed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles created resentments that would fuel the rise of Hitler and lead to World War II. The assassination also transformed warfare itself. The conflict introduced tanks, aircraft, and chemical weapons to the battlefield. Industrial-scale killing became possible. The nature of international relations changed forever. Would the tensions in Europe have found another spark if Franz Ferdinand had lived? Was the Great War inevitable, or did this single act of violence alter history's course? Could the 20th century have unfolded entirely differently? Number 1. Tsar Nicholas II and the Romanov family, 1918. The basement room was small and stuffy. The Romanov family's Tsar Nicholas II, Tsarina Alexandra, their 4 daughters, and young son Alexei were awakened in the middle of the night. They were told to dress and gather in the basement of the house where they'd been held captive for months. They believed they were being moved to a safer location as White Russian forces, loyal to the monarchy, approached Yekaterinburg. Instead, a Bolshevik firing squad entered. The commander read a brief statement announcing their execution. The shooting began without warning. When bullets and bayonets failed to kill the daughters who had diamonds sewn into their corsets for protection, the executioners resorted to clubbing them to death. The entire family, along with their physician and 3 servants, were killed. Their bodies were mutilated, burned, and buried in a secret location. This brutal execution marked the definitive end of 300 years of Romanov rule in Russia. Unlike other political assassinations, this was the systematic elimination of an entire family line, including children, to prevent any restoration of the monarchy. The murders shocked the world but solidified Bolshevik control during the Russian Civil War. The communist government initially denied responsibility, and the family's fate remained a mystery for decades. This allowed imposters like Anna Anderson to claim to be surviving Romanovs, particularly the youngest daughter Anastasia. The executions altered the course of European history. With the monarchy irrevocably destroyed, the Soviet Union emerged as the world's first communist state. The ideological battle between communism and capitalism would define much of the 20th century, from the Cold War to proxy conflicts around the globe. The mystery surrounding the family's remains was finally resolved through DNA testing in the 1990s after the fall of the Soviet Union. The Russian Orthodox Church canonized the family as martyrs. The execution site is now a pilgrimage destination. Could Russia have evolved into a constitutional monarchy had the Tsar and his family been allowed to live in exile? Would the Soviet Union have taken a different form without the symbolic power of eliminating the former regime so completely? Might the 20th century's ideological battles have been less severe? Who will be next to change history with a single act of violence? Will we ever break this cycle of assassination and upheaval?